Hello, students. Welcome to lesson number 5, The Summit Within, written by Major H.P.S. Ahluwalia. Major H.P.S. Ahluwalia was a member of the first successful Indian expedition to Mount Everest in the year 1965. How did he feel when he stood on the highest point in the world? Let us hear his story in his words, climbing the summit and then the more difficult task of climbing the summit within. So, this lesson is about HPS Ahluwalia and a member who was a member of the first successful Indian expedition to Mount Everest in 1965. And he talks about his experience of climbing the world's highest summit. He tells the readers how the physical conquest changes one on a very personal and spiritual level. After talking about climbing the physical summit, he also talks about the task of climbing the summit within. And now that we have seen the introduction of the lesson, let us go through the lesson, read the lesson, and listen to the explanation. Of all the emotions which surged through me as I stood on the summit of Everest, looking over miles of panorama below us, the dominant one, I think, was humility. The physical in me seemed to say, "Thank God it's all over." However, instead of being jubilant, there was a tinge of sadness. Was it because I had already done the ultimate in climbing, and there would be nothing higher to climb, and all roads hereafter would lead down? Now, over here we can see that Major HPS Ahluwalia is talking about his feelings, his emotions. So let us have a look at the words first. Surged means feelings that arose suddenly and very intensely inside of him. And panorama means the view of a wide area. That means when you're looking from a height, you have a uninterrupted view. So that's a panorama. And jubilant. Jubilant is to be extremely happy because of success. And tinge means just a trace, just a little bit of a shade, means very light, not a great amount, but just a little bit of a trace of sadness, a tinge of sadness. So here he's talking about his feelings as he stands there on the peak of Mount Everest. On the summit is the highest point, and he looked down and he could see miles of panorama. He could see the scenery below him. The dominant one, he says, the there were many, feelings in his mind, many emotions, but the one which was the most dominant one was that of humility. He was feeling that man is so frail, man is so small. Look at the height of the Mount Everest. What is man? And yet I have been able to come over here. So he felt very humble, and whatever physical strength inside of him seemed to say, "Thank God it's all over. There's no more of this," because it was very, very tiring. It was quite a struggle. However, instead of being very, very happy because of his success, there was a little bit of sadness. Was it because he had done it? He's thinking in his mind, was it because he had done the ultimate? That means he had done something that was that was the unconquerable thing in people's minds, because he thought that after reaching the height, now what was left for him to do? All other trails and all other roads would only lead down. So he kept thinking about all this in his mind. Then let us continue reading. By climbing the summit of Everest, you are overwhelmed by a deep sense of joy and thankfulness. It is a joy which lasts a lifetime. The experience changes you completely, and the man who has been to the mountains is never the same again. So he's talking of his personal experience. And he says, "As I look back at life after climbing Everest, I cannot help remarking about the other summit, the summit of the mind, no less formidable and no easier to climb." So here, Major is talking about, he says, by climbing that summit, the topmost point of Mount Everest, he says, there's a, like, you are overwhelmed. That means you have a feeling of deep joy, and you are also very thankful to God. You're thankful that you have been able to overcome, like you have been able to be strong enough to climb that uh, highest peak. He says, and this joy will last a person his lifetime. But he says that experience of standing on Mount Everest changes you completely. You're never the same again. So he says anybody who has been to the mountains will never be, his life will be changed forever. His outlook on life will be changed forever. So he says, as he looks back at life after climbing Mount Everest, he says he cannot help but remarking. That means cannot help but say that this is just the physical Mount Everest, but he says there is another summit, there is another topmost or a highest point, and he says that is in each and everyone's mind. And that too, if you compare it, is no less formidable. That means it is not easy, it's quite difficult, and it is not easier to climb. So, even when getting down from the summit, once the physical exhaustion had gone, I began asking myself the question why I had climbed Everest. Why did the act of reaching the summit have such a hold on my imagination? It was already a thing of the past, something done yesterday. With every passing day, it would become even more remote, and then what would remain? Would my memories fade away slowly? So, this is the major is talking to himself, like he's thinking, he is turning over this question in his mind. And he says, that after a person has climbed down from the summit, and once that physical tiredness, because they'll be very extremely tired climbing, it is a very arduous climb. That means very, very tough. You have to be really in physically very good condition to reach the top of the Mount Everest. So he says that actual task of climbing Mount Everest is a very tiring one. So once that physical exhaustion has gone away, he kept asking himself the question, why did he think of climbing the mountain, climbing the mountain peak? And why did the act that means why did it capture his imagination so much? Why did he think that he just wanted to climb that peak? So he thought to himself that already now this climb is over. So with each passing day it's going to become further and further. He's going to get away, the memory of that is going to get further and further away from his mind. And then he thought to himself, will my memories fade away very slowly? Will I one day come to a point where I forget everything about this? All these thoughts led me to question myself. That means he was introspecting, he was thinking inside of himself, searching for answers which only he could provide. No one else could give him the answers to his questions. uh, it led him to question myself as to why people climb mountains. Now, this is in general. He thought that, okay, what is the reason why I climbed and why do other people climb mountains? It's not easy to answer the question. The simplest answer would be, as others have said, I have climbed Mount Everest because it is there to climb. It presents great difficulties, and man always delights in overcoming obstacles. The obstacles in climbing a mountain are physical. That means it's a physical challenge. A climb to a summit means endurance. That means you need to have all these qualities: endurance, persistence, and willpower. The demonstration of these physical qualities is no doubt exhilarating, as it was for me also. So, here let us have a look at these two new words. Exhaustion means fatigue. Fatigue is extreme tiredness, and exhilarating is something which is very, very exciting. And here we can see the picture, the photograph of Major HPS Aluwalia. Yes, so here, like while he, after his climb, when he, came back to his normal self and that tiredness and that extreme fatigue was over, he kept thinking in his mind. And all these thoughts led him to, think about not just himself, but about other um climbers, other mountaineers in general. Why do they climb mountains? He said many people have been asked this question and they have answered saying, that yes, we have climbed it because it is there to climb, and man always loved, people love challenges. So human beings love challenges. They love to overcome obstacles because that gives you the feeling that yes, I have been able to do it, I have been able to overcome, and I am victorious. So he says the obstacles that are involved in climbing a mountain are very physical. That means your body has to be in topmost condition, your mind must be very strong, you have to have the ability of endurance. That means you cannot begin one day and say halfway, no, no, I give up, and then come down. So he says you have to endure, you have to persist, even when there are strong winds, even when it is biting cold, even when you are tired to the point of exhaustion and you just don't want to like move one foot ahead, and you have to have very strong willpower. So all these are physical qualities. He says the demonstration of all these is very exhilarating, means very exciting, as it was for him also. But then we continue reading ahead. I have a more personal answer to the question. From my childhood, I have been attracted to mountains. I have been miserable, lost when away from mountains in the plains. Mountains are nature at its best. Their beauty and majesty pose a great challenge, and like many, I believe that mountains are a means of communion with God. So the next new word is communion. Communion is a state or a feeling of close relationship, and defied means frustrated or resisted. So here, Major Aluwalia says that he says, I have a more personal answer to the question. He says from his childhood he doesn't know the reason why, but he had always been very attracted. He had been like, there was a kind of a pull. Whenever he saw mountains, he felt that he just needed to go and climb those mountains. And whenever he was away from mountains, he would be lost and very miserable. He says that mountains are nature. Like, you have nature, you see rivers and you see forests. But he says mountains are nature at its best, and their beauty and their majesty, their greatness pose a great challenge. And he says that many a times, people consider mountains to be a means of communion with God. That is why you have heard, if you have heard about like Indian culture, you will know that many sadhus, many like sages have, they've renounced the world, they have left the world and gone to the Himalayas in order to meditate, because they used to think that the mountains are a place where you won't find other people, where you can be alone, and when you're alone you can be closer to God. So he thinks that mountains are a way of communicating, of being very close to God. And he says, once having granted this, the question remains, why Everest? Because it is the highest, the mightiest, and has defied many previous attempts. It takes the last ounce of one's energy. It's a brutal struggle with rock and ice. And once taken up, it cannot be given up halfway, even when one's life is at stake. The passage back is as difficult as the passage onwards. And then, when the summit is climbed, there is the exhilaration, the joy of having done something, the sense of a battle fought and won. There is a feeling of victory and of happiness. Glimpsing a peak in the distance, I get transported to another world. So here, Major Aluwalia is saying. He says that still the question remains. He has asked himself, he has thought about other people, and he says that why Mount Everest? There are so many other mountains in the world. So he says, why? Because it is the highest, it's the mightiest, and it has resisted. Many people have tried climbing it, but they haven't succeeded. So he says, if somebody really wants to reach the summit, wants to reach the top, then it takes the last bit of one's energy, and it's a brutal, that means it is a very difficult struggle with rock and with ice, because at that 8848 meters, it is like, there are snow peaks, so you have to be able to climb over rock and ice. And he says once you have taken up that challenge, you cannot stop halfway, you have to go ahead. And he says it's not only reaching the summit, but even coming down is as difficult as the climb. But he says once you have climbed, there is that exhilaration, extreme joy, the joy of having done something. Of it's like, you've won a battle over another country or over another people, and you have won. There is a great feeling of victory and happiness that cannot be cannot be uh, spoken of in words. Like, it is something that one has to experience. So he says whenever he sees a glimpse, when he gets, like, just a glimpse of a peak in the distance, he says the moment he looks at the mountains, he gets transported to another world. and he experiences a change within himself. Something changes inside of him, which can only be called mystical. That means it is like something very godly by its beauty. It's very spiritual. By its beauty, aloofness, might, ruggedness, and the difficulties encountered on the way, the peak draws me to it, as Everest did. It's a challenge that is very difficult to resist. He says that whenever he sees a mountain peak, he is drawn to it. And it's like spiritual beauty, the beauty of the uh, peaks, the aloofness. That means they stand all alone. There's no other peak like, of that height. So it stands all alone. It is extremely strong and rugged, means the rocks are very sharp and there are manifold difficulties which he encountered on the way. But yet that peak pulls him, attracts him to it as Everest did. And so looking back, he finds that I have not yet fully explained why. So even to himself, even though he like asks himself that question, he is not fully able to answer it. What is it exactly? He cannot put his finger on exactly why he climbed Mount Everest. It's like answering, he says, it's like answering a question why you breathe. Why why do each one of us, why do we breathe? Why do we want to help our neighbor? Because it is something which is inbuilt inside of us. It is intrinsic. That means it is inside of us. We cannot separate it from our fiber and being. Why do you want to do good acts? He says, there's no, you can't, you can't dissect it like you would take a flower, you would take a small tiny animal and you would dissect it. You cannot dissect it so cleanly and very in a clinical fashion. So he says, there's no final answer possible. And then there is the fact that Everest is not just a physical climb. The man who has been to the mountain top becomes conscious in a special manner of his own smallness in this large universe. Another thing that the mountain, the summit teaches a human being, I told you at the beginning, is that you realize how little, how small man is in this whole, standing on that topmost point. When you look down and look at the panorama, you realize how small, how little, how finite man is. Like you get a feeling of your like smallness in this large universe that comes very sharply to one's mind. The physical conquest of a mountain is only one part. I told you the physical conquest is only one part. There is much more to it than that. It is followed by a sense of fulfillment. As the major has spoken, there was a feeling there was a lot of hard struggle in order to reach that mountain. But after that, there was a sense of joy, exhilaration, and fulfillment. There is the satisfaction of a deep urge to rise above one's surroundings. That means there is a call inside of him, there's a desire inside of him to rise above one's surroundings. All of us, we are earthbound, all of us are with our feet to the ground. But there are some people who want to go to that experience, that height, which not every human being has. It's like there are many birds. There's a chicken, there's a hen, and there's an eagle. The chicken is always earthbound. It's with its feet to the ground. But the eagles will never be seen where you find hens or chicken. When you find those animals which are close to the ground, eagles love to soar on heights. They build their nests right up. It's the same way Major Ahluwalia feels that the physical conquest is just one thing. There is a deep desire in his heart to rise above his surroundings. It's the eternal love for adventure in man. He says there is something that God has put inside each person, and some of them like given to that and they want to go and they take up that challenge. The experience is not just physical, it is emotional. That means he says no, that after climbing the mountain a human being is never the same again. For your whole life, your perspective, your attitude, your thoughts, everything changes, and it's a very spiritual experience. It's like you have come close in contact with God. It is a very it's a very humbling experience. You realize how small, how little you are. Consider a typical climb towards the summit on the last heights, like you're going to the last lap of your journey up the Mount Everest. You're sharing a rope with another climber. You firm in. That is, you make yourself firm, you make yourself strong. He cuts the steps in the hard ice, then he belays you, and you inch your way up. The climb is grim, it's very serious. You strain every nerve as you take every step. That means you're very tense. Famous climbers have left records of the help given by others. They have also recorded how they needed just that help, otherwise, they wouldn't have succeeded, else, they might have given up. Breathing is very difficult. You curse yourself for having let yourself in for this. Like, you feel that whatever made me do this, I should not have come. You wonder why you ever undertook the ascent. There are moments when you feel like going back. It would be sheer relief to go down instead of up. But almost at once you snap out of that mood. There is something in you that does not let you give up. So here, the major is describing the actual climb. He says that any typical climb towards it, that means the last leg or the last lap of that uh, journey up the Everest, he says you're sharing a rope. That means you're not doing things all alone, right? You're sharing a rope with another climber, and you make yourself firm, and you inch means you're going very, very, very extremely slowly. You're going up, and the climb is serious because one small mistake and everything will be over. And that's why it, like, it calls for indomitable courage. It calls for you to have your nerve as you take every step. And he's saying that famous climbers have left records. That means they have thanked others for the wonderful help that they have given. They have not spoken of themselves, but they have spoken of the help that they needed just in time, and they got it from others. Otherwise, they would have given up. He says even breathing at that altitude is very difficult, and many a times you curse yourself that, oh, why did I think of doing this? But the next minute, like, you stamp out of that mood, and there is something inside of you that does not allow you to give up the struggle. That means in that moment, like, your mind changes and you say, no, no, I cannot think like this, I must go on. And your companion keeps up with you. Just another 50 feet or 100 maybe. You ask yourself, is there no end? That means you're already tired, like you just want it to finish. You look at your companion and he looks at you, and you draw inspiration from each other. And then, without first being aware of it, and he says without even realizing it, like, you draw courage from the other person, and then looking at him, you says, if he's not giving up, I too will not give up. And before you know it, you're at the summit. That means without realizing that you've, like, put in such a lot of hard work. Looking around from the summit, you tell yourself that it was worthwhile. So when you reach that peak, when you reach the summit, when you reach that topmost point, you tell yourself, wow, this is really worthwhile. Because very, very few people, like, of all the population in the world, just a very, very like, very small fraction of people have been able to scale the Mount Everest. Other silvery peaks appear through the clouds, and if you're lucky, the sun may be on those peaks, and so you'd get such a breathtaking view. The surrounding peaks look like a jeweled necklace. A jeweled necklace, just a minute, children. Jeweled necklace around the neck on your summit. Of your summit. Below, you see vast valleys sloping into the distance. It is an ennobling, enriching experience to just look down from the summit of a mountain. You bow down and make your obeisance to whichever god you worship. So the major says that if you're, like, lucky enough, then other peaks, like, there are a lot of clouds there, but if the sun is on the other peaks, then you will be able to see through them, and the whole surrounding looks like a jeweled necklace. Like, if you've seen your mummy or someone wearing a nice necklace with stones in it, and you will see the shine. In the same way, you will see the Mount Everest and all around the other peaks like a jeweled necklace around the neck of your summit. And below you, you see vast valleys sloping in the distance. It's an ennobling. That means it's an experience that makes you feel really noble. Like, it's something which you realize not many people have been alive to see this. What you're seeing at that moment, like, so you become very noble. It's an ennobling experience. It makes you incredibly rich just to look down from the summit of a mountain, and you want to just bow down and make, like, bow down before God to show your obedience or your surrender, your submission to God. And he says, whoever has climbed here, whichever god they worship, they, they feel, God, you are so great. You're the one who has created this wonderful mountain and all this. And so man wants to bow down when he looks at the breathtaking scenery in front of him. So he says, since he is a Sikh by religion, he left on Everest a picture of Guru Nanak. Rawat left, that means his companion left a picture of goddess Durga. Fudorji, a Sherpa, left a relic of the Buddha, and Edmund Hillary had buried a cross under a cane, that is a heap of rocks and stones in the snow. And these are not symbols of conquest, but of great reverence, showing your humility, showing how much, you want to thank God for having made it possible. Then the experience of having climbed to the summit changes you completely. There is another summit. It is within yourself, it is in your own mind. Each man carries within himself his own mountain peak he must climb to reach to a fuller knowledge of himself. It is fearful and unscalable. It cannot be climbed by anyone else. You yourself have to do it. The physical act of climbing to the summit of a mountain. So here, after talking about the physical, experience of having reaching and the spiritual experience of standing there on the summit, then Major HPS Ahluwalia says that this experience changes you completely. You are transformed. You're never the same person again. Here, the author in Fudorji, there's a picture on the summit of Mount Everest, and he says, but there is another summit, and where is that? Well, it is within yourself. It is in your own mind. Every man carries within himself his own mountain peak. That means there are things in your life which are standing tall like Mount Everest, and you have not been able to conquer those things. So he says that every man has within himself his own personal Mount Everest, and in order to climb it, first of all, you need to know yourself well. It is fearful and unscalable. That means you cannot do it if you do not know yourself very well. And he says, no one else can climb that Mount Everest, your inner Mount Everest. No one can do it for you. It has to be climbed by you only. You yourself have to do it. And the physical act of climbing to the summit of a mountain outside is akin to the act of climbing the mountain within. He says, just like you need a lot of preparation, you need to prepare your body, you need to be fit, you need to eat well, you need to, have a lot of practice in mountain climbing in order to climb the physical Mount Everest. He says the same way, you need a lot of practice to know what is your inner Mount Everest. And in the same way, you need to put in a lot of effort in order to scale that, in order to reach the top, in order to be victorious over it. So he says the effects of both the climbs are the same. When you climb the Mount Everest, you are extremely tired, you are fatigued. And he says when you climb your personal Mount Everest, the effect is the same. Whether the mountain you climb is physical or emotional and spiritual, the climb will certainly change you. That means even as the climb to the summit, climbing Mount Everest has changed Major Ahluwalia in his thoughts, in his attitude to life, in the way he looks at himself, in the way he looks at other human beings. The same way, climbing your personal Mount Everest will also change you completely. The climb will, it teaches you much about the world and about yourself. I venture to think that my experience as an Everester has provided me with the inspiration to face life's ordeals resolutely. Now, ordeal is a very painful experience because it involves a lot of pain, a lot of physical strength. And resolutely is with determination or firmness. That means you have to make up your mind and not give up. So, when, in conclusion, what does Major HPS Ahluwalia says? He says that his experience has given him the inspiration to fail. That if I can climb the Mount Everest, then surely I can climb, each and every mountain that is there within inside of me. And climbing the mountain was a worthwhile experience. He considers it that it was worth climbing. So the conquest of the internal summit is equally worthwhile. So The internal summits are perhaps higher than Everest. Here, he is giving like an inspiration to each and every reader, to each and every student. Major Ahluwalia says that climbing the mountain was worthwhile, and so like you must make up your mind that whatever is there in your life that you have not been able to do, that too is worth trying, that too is worth climbing, and you will have the satisfaction of having overcome. You will be victorious, you will be a victor, you will be jubilant at having, you will feel great happiness once you have climbed your personal Mount Everest. And he says that I feel the inner Mount Everest, the summit that is there within, sometimes they are even higher than Mount Everest. So, this is a really wonderful lesson with an inspiring, like, it gives us, it has a lot of inspiration that if we cannot, like, not everyone can go and climb Mount Everest, but his experience, like we can understand a lot from his experience, that he says that sometimes in our lives there are difficulties, there are struggles, there are things in our life that we need to climb, that we need to reach the peak, we need to scale that, we need to surmount those difficulties. And all of us should think that yes, this is worth doing and we should try doing it. Then we can say with Major HPS Ahluwalia that yes, I am a victor, I have changed, and God has given me the strength to do all that I need to do in life. So, children, let us look at the comprehension check. Standing on Everest, the writer was, what was he? He was jubilant and sad at the same time. The second one, the emotion that gripped him was one of humility and a sense of smallness. The third one, the summit of the mind refers to, what does it refer to? It refers to a fuller knowledge of oneself. Then, so whatever is relevant, only take that one in your textbook itself. Then, working with the text, what are the three qualities that played a very major role in the author's climb, in the major's climb? The three qualities that played a very major role in the author's climb are endurance, his ability to endure, persistence, not giving up, and his strong willpower. Why is adventure, which is risky, also very pleasurable? Well, an adventure which is risky in nature poses a great challenge and obstacles in its path. Human beings gain immense pleasure and satisfaction in overcoming these obstacles. Then, the next one, what was it about Mount Everest that the author found irresistible? Well, the author could not resist climbing Mount Everest because it is the highest and the mightiest of all the peaks in the world, and it has defied, it has resisted many attempts. It demands a person's last ounce of energy. That means the last bit of energy that you have, it requires you to give even that. Then the next one, question number 4. One does not do it, that is, climbing a peak for fame alone. What does one do it for really? That means he is introspecting, he's trying to put his finger on what is the exact reason why people take such a lot of trouble in climbing mountain peaks. Well, he says it's true that one does not climb the highest peak for fame. That means in order to become famous, it is a test of one's endurance, of one's persistence and willpower. One reason is simply because it exists, because it's there, right? Many people have said that I have climbed this mountain because it's there. And the other reason is because it holds the capacity to change a person from the inside out. That means you become a totally new person. Your outlook changes and it transforms the climber spiritually, emotionally, physically. That means all kinds of transformation takes place. The man who has been to the mountains never returns the same as he was before. That means there is a wonderful change. Question number 5. He becomes conscious in a special manner of his own smallness in this large universe. This awareness defines an emotion mentioned in the first paragraph. What is that emotion? He becomes conscious in a special manner of his own smallness in this large universe. This awareness defines the impact of humility. We call it namrata. So, of the person having climbed the peak, that means you feel so humble. That means you're not, uh, you're not worthy to be standing there, and yet you have been, God has allowed you to do that, to achieve that. So, you become very humble. What were the symbols of reverence left by members of the team on Everest? So, as leaving a symbol of reverence, the author left a picture of Guru Nanak as he was a Sikh. His fellow climbers Rawat and Fudorji left pictures and relics of Goddess Durga and the Buddha, respectively. And Edmund Hillary built a cross, that means he dug a cross under a heap of rocks in the snow. What, according to the writer, did his experience as an Everester teach him? Well, there are lots of lessons that he learned. The first thing that he learned was that he goes on thinking about his experience, and it has given him the strength and inspiration to deal with life's painful experiences with determination and firmness. That means it has made him a very strong person. Then, question number 2, write a sentence against each of the following statements. Your sentence should explain the statement. You can pick out sentences from the text and rewrite them. The first one, so you can do this here itself. The first one has been done for you. Now, in this, the experience changes you completely is one who has been to the mountains is never the same again. So, whatever is said here, the same sentence you have to find in the lesson. Man takes delight in overcoming obstacles. Well, the obstacles in climbing a mountain are physical. A climb to the summit, to the top, means endurance, persistence, and willpower. The demonstration of these physical qualities is no doubt exhilarating. That means it makes you very happy. Mountains are nature at its best. Well, mountains are a means of communion with God. The fourth one, the going was difficult, but the after effects were satisfying. This is the physical conquest of a mountain is only one part of the achievement. There is more to it than that. It is followed by a sense of fulfillment. Then the next one, the physical conquest of a mountain is really a spiritual experience. There is the fact that Everest is not just a physical climb. The man who has been to the mountain top becomes conscious in a special manner of his own smallness in this large universe. It shows him how finite he is. Next, we come to working with language. Look at the italicized phrases and their meanings given in brackets. Mountains are nature at its best. That means nature's best form and appearance. Your life is at risk. At risk means in danger. You run the risk of losing your life. So, uh, he was at his best or worst in the meeting. It was his best performance or it was his worst performance. Now fill in the blanks in the following dialogues, choosing suitable phrases from those given in the box. Now there are 5 phrases given here and you have to choose the correct one. So the first one, teacher, you were away from school without permission. Go to the principal at once and submit your explanation. Then the pupil says, yes, madam, but would you help me write it first? So these are kind of jokes. Arun, are you unwell? No, not, not at all. Why do you ask? If you were unwell, I would send you to my uncle. He is a doctor. So this is all in a very light vein. Mary is talking to David. Almost every Indian film has an episode of love at first sight. David, is that what makes them so popular in foreign countries? So, Asif, you look depressed. Why are your spirits at such a low ebb today? Use such in the phrase. At such a low ebb today. I have to write 10 sentences using words that I have never heard before. Sheba, your big moment is close at hand. How should I welcome it? Get up and go receive your trophy. Now, we have to write the noun forms of the following words. That means whatever words are given there, you have to use ANC or ENC and you have to make them into a noun. That means from endure, you have to make it a thing. So, endurance. So, how do you spell that? ENDURANCE. The second one, persist. Here you have PERSISTENCE, persistence. The third one, Signify becomes significance. Significance. Then confide becomes confidence. Confidence. The next one. Maintain becomes maintenance. 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 And abhor becomes abhorrence. Abhorrence. Then let us go to the next question. That is question number 3. Match words under A with the meanings under B. So the first one, remote is far away from. The next one is means is methods. The third one, dominant is most prominent. Formidable is difficult to overcome. And overwhelmed is to be overcome or overpowered. So the answers. There were formidable obstacles on the way, but we reached our destination safely. The second one, we have no means of finding out what happened there. Then the next one, why he lives in a house remote from any town or village is more than I can tell. The next one, dashed by gratitude, overwhelmed by gratitude, we bowed to the speaker for his valuable advice. Then the old castle stands in a dominant position from the sleepy town, above the sleepy town. Speaking and writing. Write a composition describing a visit to the hills or any place which you have found very beautiful and inspiring. So, this is after completing the question answers, then you must write this essay. Composition is an essay. So, you are used to essay writing, aren't you? So, before writing, you don't need to work in small groups because you're at home. Then you can just think about it like if you've been to a hill station or been to a seaside, whichever place you have found very beautiful and you still remember it, then you need to write that. Consider this sentence. Mountains are a means of communicating. It's a means of communion, means having a close relationship with God, being very close to God. Think of the act of worship or prayer. When you pray, it is like, a time when you feel that you know that you're close to God. You believe yourself to be in the presence of the divine power. In a way, you are in communion with that power. Imagine the climber on the top of the summit, the height that he has reached, limitless sky, the climber's last ounce of energy, feelings of gratitude, humility, and peace. The majesty of the mountains does bring you very close to nature and the spirit and the joy that lives there if you have the ability. So you must write about your own personal experience, just like Major HPS Ahluwalia has written. You too can write about any experience that you have had. So, thank you, children. Make sure you read the lesson because this lesson is such a beautiful one that you need to read it several times before you actually understand the depth of what Mr. HPS Ahluwalia is saying. And I hope that you too will be able to climb, you will be able to scale many inner Mount Everest. So, thank you and have a nice day.